today?
Well, little Jimmy, I'm gonna teach you how to master a map in PvP. And not just any map, Jimmy. Burnout. My name is Castle, just a regular guy who wants to help you improve in PvP and who talks way too much. Here's a list of things that I think in my experience make me understand how to master a map. Those of you that are already subscribed to my channel understand that I talk quite a bit. As a result, I can't fit all of this in one video. I'm sorry.
It's just who I am.
It's looking like it's going to take 3 videos to get through all of these, but I've highlighted the ones that we're going to cover today. So let's get into it. Starting with map view and callouts. Of course, the best way to learn a map is to simply play the damn thing. No professional golfer shows up to a tournament without knowing every slope, every tree line, anything that they're going to run into. They know exactly where they want to place that ball, and they only have to adjust on tournament day depending on how the fairway is cut. And so it's no different when it comes to mastering a map. You just have to play it over and over before you should expect to do well. But I personally found I was able to up my game in scrims when I finally looked at a top-down image of the map while I was in a private match. A different perspective can go a long way. This image was created by Relict, and if you're watching this, thank you. These maps are incredible. Relict has made these images for a ton of maps in D2. They show callouts based on the name under your little radar. The main takeaway for number 1 is to know your callouts relative to the map. And that seems obvious, but maps tend to develop community-based callouts. Perfect example is on Endless Vale, where everyone in the competitive community calls this spot toilet. And we know damn well the radar doesn't say toilet there. Number 2, here are all the spawn locations for Burnout. It's worth noting that within each of these bubbles, there are multiple little spots you can spawn in. So it's not like you're always going to be in that exact same spot, aiming in a certain way every single time. Oddly enough though, not all bubbles have the same amount of variation it seems, and some maps, their bubble is just one spot, and it's kind of insane. So when you hear a lot about a map having terrible spawns, it's usually because people have figured out which bubbles don't have variations, and it makes it a lot easier for spawn sniping somebody. Burnout isn't necessarily terrible for that though. They're fairly well distributed. It's mostly an inside versus outside thing, but we're gonna get into that. My main takeaway here is to just know what general locations your opponents will spawn. I find when I'm helping people out in comp, for example, they're kind of running around like a chicken with their head cut off. They have no spatial awareness on where they should be looking when we kill 1, 2, or even all 3 teammates. So pay attention to this so you at least have an idea. Number 3 is survival scanning. Wait, remember how I said I talk way too much? I had to cut this one out. This one will be in my next video. Survival scanning is essentially where I'm going to show you all of the routes that I take, which ones I prefer, and all of the spots that I look at when I'm going to take a route. But for now, we're going to have to skip to the next topic. Number 4, radar limits. How much can my radar detect anyways? I sat in the very back behind altar, right in the middle on that tower, and then outside on the far edge. And I've put on 3 different colored bubbles to represent those scenarios and overlap them. Your radar can see so much. The radius of this is just shy of 50 meters, which for comparison's sake is well over a hand cannon range. I mean, looking at the middle one alone, you can see almost every single thing on the map. So for you pesky little snipers out there, you can see where you need to go if you want to cover west or east yard without pinging their radar.
Guys, you go forward. I'll camp here.
But the main reason I'm showing this is because a lot of people don't realize how far it extends. People tend to think that they need to go all the way to an area just to confirm that there's no one there, when they actually don't. It's because you weren't paying the correct attention to the timing of their spawn. In other words, that's 7 seconds. I personally think the radar extends too far and causes passive gameplay because this essentially deters flanking. But hey, I'm just a boomer, what do I know? Oh, and a random side note. In case you're like my buddy Joey and you don't actually know how the radar works in this game, you're not alone. This video is about map analysis, but here's a quick crash course. Number 1, if an enemy is within 5 meters, this is what your radar will look like, okay? But there's variations of this. See how it's bright red right now in the middle? That means that they're on the same vertical level as you. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen now, you'll see that the ring is more bright on the edge and sort of a little bit more dim in the middle. That means they're still within that 5 meters because this is the inner circle, but they're not on the same level as you. They're either above you or below you. Scenario 2, if enemies are between 6 meters and 23 meters, it'll give you that pizza slice around the outer ring. Similarly, it'll look like this if they're on the same level as you, but on the right-hand side, you'll see the gradients are different. That's if they're above you or below you. And then last but not least, from 24 meters to that limit I mentioned of 48 meters, they'll ping on the very outer edge of your radar. radar. But do keep in mind that if they're crouching, it'll actually reduce their presence on your radar for 2 seconds at a time. They'll actually be off your radar and it'll be blinking every 2 seconds. So there's that small window for them to make a play if they happen to be crouching, for example. Number 5. Systemic spawning. This is a topic I could teach for an hour on its own. I mentioned earlier that I struggled to keep my videos short, so today I'm going to be giving you the tip of the iceberg. But if you want to learn more on this topic specifically, please tell me in the comments. Let's take a look at those bubbles again. When one person dies, the game pays attention to the other 5 on the map and chooses what it thinks is most fair. The most basic example I could give of spawn control would be this. If I kill somebody and then I run to this bubble, my enemy will not spawn inside this bubble. Duh. That's very binary though, and the game doesn't just look at one bubble. When you scrim enough on a map, you start to recognize some invisible lines that impacts the game's spawning decisions. I say lines, but developers are beginning to make these lines into thicker zones. So let me just show you an example, and then I'll talk about these lines and these zones. Now this is a pretty classic one for Burnout. If you were to watch a really high-end player like say Potato during a tournament, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him pull off this snipe or even one in East Yard. So let me pull up the map and show you how this one is done. Now I'm adding some pink lines to the drawing. I know it's getting a bit messy, but hear me out. I like to call these trigger lines, and they work just like that basic spawn bubble example I showed you a moment ago. If you cross one of these lines and go into that particular area, the enemy shouldn't spawn there. I say shouldn't because sometimes the game does some funky things, but these are very consistent in my experience. When the game is trying to spawn someone up, it's usually looking for the safest location, which means either with their teammates under safe condition, in other words, not under fire, then just as far away as possible from the enemy team. The problem comes up when maps aren't the size of Texas. Distance in this game can be covered very quickly, and as a result, on a map like Burnout, which is actually not as bad as Dead Cliff or Endless Vale, you end up with a bit of an X pattern because it typically sends you to the opposite corner of the map. The example I showed you is a classic one because it involves a fight in Altar area where one team gets a pick and then they push the other 2 that are alive in a 3v2. After they've secured or they know they're comfortable getting those last 2 kills, the team sniper will typically start heading towards where that first person's going to spawn up, and the reason is all about timing. Eventually I'm going to teach you the difference between forcing a spawn and split spawning, but for now I'm just going to talk about the fact that in scrims it's a 7-second respawn, and some of the most high-level players are extremely good at keeping an internal clock of that 7 seconds after they get that first pick. Alright, so this is where the bloodbath happened. One of my teammates' objectives is to head out this way. Initially, it's to block off this area from that first spawn coming up. As he's walking by, he's blocking off West Tumbler, and then as long as he crosses this line right here, he's now going to block off that quadrant. Meanwhile, my other teammate has 2 options. They can either play it safe and stay in the back to cross off this area, or they can play around with the area of Bridge and East Tumbler. And by them doing that and heading in that direction, that really narrows down my spawn options. And if my teammate reaches East Tumbler quick enough, I feel very confident that they're going to spawn in this location right there. But if I'm not so sure, I'll just hop up on top mid and I can actually see 2 variations like this. And then guess what? Moments after that kill, who else is going to be spawning up now? The other 2 teammates. Well, where are they probably going to spawn? Since we've all pushed in this direction right here, they're going to spawn inside, right? So all we have to do now is literally turn around and go and spawn kill them there. Take a look. All right, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask me in the comments. I originally wanted to cover all the topics in one video, but obviously I had to split it up. So the next video is going to show you all those routes that you can take in Burnout and what I am paying attention to when I go through them, or which ones I really don't like and why. And then time permitting, I'll cover the rest of that list or do that in a third video. Either way, if this is something you guys like, please let me know. These take a long time to make, but I really do enjoy them. So I actually want to do it for Dead Cliffs, Endless Vale, Javelin, and try and help out in any way I can. That's it for now. If you enjoyed the video, dropping a like can really help the video gain some traction, and I'll catch you guys in part 2.
Peace.